Nikolai Volkoff was the Soviet monster America was raised to boo. He sang the Russian anthem in Madison Square Garden like he was pissing on the flag, and fans wanted to kill him for it. Literally. One night in Philly, a guy pulled a knife, but here's the twist, off camera. The guy was basically a Serbian Mr. Rogers with a Bible and a bench press. Born Josip Peruzovic in what's now Croatia, Nikolai came to the US and built a career pretending to be the exact thing he left behind, a cartoon communist heel. He teamed with the Iron Sheik, kicked off WrestleMania 1, and waved the Soviet flag like it owed him child support. But it wasn't love for the gimmick that kept him in boots. It was a paycheck. Because behind the Cold War heat, Volkoff was miserable about the whole damn act. He wasn't a monster, he wasn't even Russian, but the world knew him as this Cold War cliché in red trunks. And the older he got, the more he hated what wrestling had turned him into. He didn't hold a ton of grudges, but the ones he did were cold and personal. Let's break down the 3 things that actually got under the Red Menace's skin. And yeah, one of them is exactly who you're thinking. On camera, they were the tag team from hell. Volkoff waved the Soviet flag, Sheik waved the Iranian one, and together they had enough heel heat to boil a bald eagle. They won the WWF tag titles at WrestleMania 1, got booed out of buildings, and made Vince richer every time someone hurled a chair. But behind the scenes, it wasn't Cold War unity. It was 2 time bombs sharing a dressing room, and Nikolai got real tired of Sheik's bullshit. At first, they got along. But as the Sheik spiraled into addiction, Volkoff distanced himself fast. Sheik was snorting coke like it was cardio and picking fights in locker rooms with everyone. Volkoff? He was deeply religious, didn't drink, didn't do drugs, and treated the job like a job, not a lifestyle. To Sheik, that made him boring. To Nikolai, that made Sheik an anchor dragging him into tabloid hell. They stopped traveling together. They stopped talking. Volkoff hated being lumped in with Sheik's circus act. One backstage witness said Volkoff eventually refused to do spots that involved Sheik throwing salt or doing the full cartoon racist shtick. He wanted the heat, not the humiliation. Things came to a head when Sheik was arrested with Hacksaw Jim Duggan in '87. Coked up, drunk, and riding with the babyface he was feuding with. Vince fired them both in the PR fallout. Volkoff got spared, but he never forgave the Sheik for wrecking the gimmick's credibility. Years later, when Sheik tried to get another tag run going on the Indies, Volkoff refused to reunite. He didn't want to be around him, didn't want to talk about him, didn't even want his name on the goddamn flyer. And it cut deep. This wasn't just a broken team. Volkoff resented him. The guy who made him rich also made him ashamed. He once told a friend, "I wasn't a clown, but they turned us into clowns." That was about Vince, but the punchline was always Sheik. Volkoff didn't go around airing his dirty laundry. But in the case of Iron Sheik, the Cold War wasn't just kayfabe. He hated the guy like a sober man hates his own DUI mugshot. Imagine waking up every day and having to pretend you're the biggest cartoon villain of the Cold War, and nobody gives a shit that you're actually just a regular guy trying not to choke on vodka breath and stereotypes. That was Nikolai Volkoff's daily hell. Here's the kicker. He wasn't even Russian. He was Croatian. That's like casting a Canadian to play Fidel Castro and telling him to shout "Viva la Revolucion" with a straight face. The WWF didn't care. They wanted a Soviet boogeyman, so they shoved Nikolai into red trunks, handed him a flag, and told him to smile while he got booed like he kicked someone's grandma. Volkoff hated the gimmick so much it was basically a bad Tinder date he couldn't swipe left on. The guy was a grown man forced to sing the Soviet anthem live to crowds that wanted to kill him, and not in a sexy, romantic way. Every anthem was a public humiliation, like being forced to karaoke "My Heart Will Go On" after breaking up with your ex, in front of thousands. He called the whole shtick a clown act, but with more politics and less dignity. Wrestling turned him into a propaganda puppet for a Cold War no one cared about anymore. The gimmick wasn't just a costume, it was a shackle, a straitjacket painted red. The absurdity was stunning. A religious, polite family man cast as the world's most hated villain just because of his birthplace and a cheap flag. It's like casting your grandma as a Bond villain because she owns a handbag. Volkoff's quiet hatred for the gimmick simmered beneath the surface. It was a box the WWF locked him in, then threw away the key. Red tights, a fake accent, a bad anthem. All for the heat, none of the respect. The man behind the mask was invisible, swallowed whole by a character so cartoonish, even Popeye's nemesis Bluto looked subtle. So yeah, he hated the gimmick, And who could blame him? If you had to wear a Soviet onesie to get a paycheck, you'd hate it too. If wrestling's a circus, Vince McMahon's the creepy ringmaster who somehow gets paid billions to scream into a microphone while his moral compass collects dust in a gutter. Nikolai Volkoff loathed the guy for all the bullshit Vince piled on, both in the ring and behind closed doors. Volkoff saw Vince for what he really was, a man who treated talent like disposable props and moral boundaries like an inconvenient suggestion. The guy built an empire by peddling cartoonish hate and selling it to millions, then allegedly used his power like a predator with a badge. If you think the Soviet gimmick was humiliating, imagine working for a guy rumored to treat women worse than his villains treat babyfaces. Volkoff's gripe wasn't just creative control or contract squabbles, it was a deep disgust at how Vince turned pro wrestling into a grotesque sideshow where dignity went to die. He watched his career get funneled into one humiliating stereotype after another, while Vince laughed all the way to the bank, counting his millions and apparently ignoring every red flag about his own conduct. You want proof? Vince's alleged perversions, NDA payments, and lawsuits are wrestling's dirty secret. It's like watching The Wizard of Oz's curtain pulled back, and behind it, a greedy, sleazy little man who sold out everyone for fame and fortune. Volkoff wasn't just a Soviet heel, he was a human being, stuck in Vince's dystopian joke. The bitterness ran deep. Volkoff once said Vince's business was not wrestling, but exploitation, a machine that chewed people up and spat them out once they stopped making cash. Nikolai resented how Vince treated him like a damn prop instead of a person. And let's not forget the guy's ego. Vince acted like he was the second coming of God in spandex, and he expected his wrestlers to worship the ground he trampled on. Meanwhile, he was allegedly dragging his empire into scandals so dark they'd make a mob boss blush. NDAs and hush money stacked higher than his ego, covering up the kind of shit that belongs in a true crime doc, not a wrestling promotion. In the end, the man who played the villain on screen knew who the real monsters were, and it wasn't the fans throwing beer cans or the Cold War enemies he mocked. It was the guy running the whole damn show. Vince McMahon, the puppeteer who pulled the strings so hard he broke the man inside the costume, turning a human being into a punchline, and himself into a pariah behind closed doors. Here's the twist no one expected. Nikolai Volkoff, the fake Russian villain, might have been one of the few good guys in the locker room. Behind the accent, the fur hat, and that Cold War clown suit was a guy who hated bullshit, hated liars, and hated the walking PR disasters calling themselves promoters. He wasn't bitter for no reason. He was bitter because he saw the business rot from the inside. He saw guys like Sheik piss away loyalty, gimmicks that mocked his heritage, and bosses like Vince treat morals like used condoms. Volkoff didn't want 5-star matches. He wanted basic respect, and in Vince's world, that cost more than TV rights. He was the villain on screen, sure, but backstage, he saw through the real propaganda, the fake friends, the company men, the sleaze, and he never forgot who twisted the knife first. The crazy part? Volkoff was a patriot, a family man, a devout Christian who hated being turned into a cartoon. So yeah, maybe the accent was fake, but the disgust? That was all shoot. And the enemies? He chose them carefully. So here lies the punchline. The heel was a better man than the kingmakers. And the scariest part? He fucking knew it. Like and subscribe. If you made it this far, hit that like button harder than Vince hits NDAs. Subscribe for more videos pulling back the curtain and exposing wrestling's real monsters. No myths, no bullshit. Just blood, beef, and broken kayfabe. Thanks for watching.